Universities are supposed to be the place where the open exploration of ideas, including controversial ideas, is celebrated and seen as a pathway to future knowledge and the ways that societies grow.
Today on Center Stage, Andrew Manuel Crespo is a professor at Harvard University Law School and general counsel for the Harvard Faculty's chapter of the American Association of University Professors, which is suing the Trump administration over its attempts to dictate what can and can't be taught or researched at the university. Andrew Manuel Crespo, thank you very much for joining us here on Center Stage. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start then at the time of April 2025. Donald Trump threatens to withhold Harvard's tax-exempt status, which escalates other threats that he's made to the university's funding. Just for our global audience, put it into context for us. What is the Trump administration's problem with Harvard University and other universities and what they're teaching?
Yeah, I think part of the context here is to realize that this is not just an attack on Harvard. This has been a part of a mounting set of attacks against some of the key institutions in a free and open society. Right? When we have seen people come into power across the world who are trying to aggressively challenge the norms of a constitutional democracy, of a free society, they tend to follow a similar playbook. They attack essential institutions that protect the free and open exchange of ideas and that are in place to check grasps for power. They attack courts, they attack the free press, they attack lawyers, and they attack universities. And that has been what we have seen from the Trump administration. And when you have seen attempts to convert countries into authoritarian types of rule, there have been attacks on universities. And the first attacks in the United States were actually not on Harvard, they were on Columbia University, where there was a threat to withhold $400 million if the university did not submit to a series of demands that would have basically placed it under federal oversight or federal control. Columbia acceded to those demands. It did not get its money back. In fact, the Trump administration came back with even more cuts. But the lesson and the message it was trying to send across higher education was, we're coming for each of these other institutions next. There was a list of 60 universities that were targeted, and Harvard was the one that got the next letter from the Trump administration with similar sets of demands and with threats to withhold over $2 billion in federal research funding to our university.
And a lot of comparisons made with Hungary, Viktor Orban, and that kind of what some call the sort of slippery slope. Did you ever imagine in your wildest dreams as an academic, as a legal expert, that you would be in a position in the year 2025 where you would be suing the government effectively?
I could never have imagined that I'd be suing the government over this, over attempts to suppress speech at one of the leading research universities in our country, attempts to try to use the power of the federal government to make people stop asking important questions about our society, to basically make them shut up. It's one of the most anti-American moves that I could have imagined. We have a First Amendment in this country. It guarantees the freedom of speech. Our Supreme Court has long held that academic freedom at universities is at the center of that freedom of speech, precisely because universities are supposed to be the place where the open exploration of ideas, including controversial ideas, is celebrated and seen as a pathway to future knowledge and the ways that societies grow. Our federal government for over half a century has had a partnership with our research universities, investing billions of dollars in them because those dollars go to help research that is finding cures for awful diseases, inventing new technologies, that partnership had an awful other side to it. That in the hands of a government that is trying not to pursue knowledge but suppress speech, not to pursue research but quash dissent on our college campuses, that money could become a weapon. And it's been weaponized against our universities in the most dangerous ways possible. To say that I could never have seen it coming would slightly overstate it, only because the president campaigned on doing this. When Donald Trump was running for his second term in office, he said this is what he was going to do. He said that he didn't like what was being taught on American campuses, that they were too left, that they had an ideology that he didn't approve of, and that he wanted them teaching his ideology, that he didn't want it to be Harvard University, he wanted it to be Trump University. He promised he would do this. He was elected, and now he's doing it.
So you're taking the administration to court, and you're following the logic that you take the administration to court, if you win, then things go your way. Donald Trump has said that he will abide by what the courts decide. But it's also clear that his administration is kind of pushing as far as it can to see where things land. Are you convinced that even if you were to win, that you would get your way?
Look, this is a central question that's going to be one of the major critical stress points and test points for our country in the coming months. Donald Trump has had an unprecedented number of federal lawsuits brought against his administration and an unprecedented number of losses. There are countless and countless and countless orders from federal courts across our country, from judges appointed by Republican presidents and Democratic presidents, judges appointed by Joe Biden and judges appointed by Donald Trump himself, who are issuing orders saying time and time again what the president and his administration are doing is unlawful.
One of Donald Trump's major selling points during his campaign was to end DEI, diversity and equity and inclusion. And we've seen that played out across the government in the first few months, the Pentagon and various other parts of the government. Harvard University has pushed back, but it's also, you could choose your words. We could say it's dismantled, or it's recalibrated, or it's rebranded its DEI office. How has that gone down? And how has that even come about? Because Harvard has been pushing back, but it seems it's also not pushed back.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think pushing back and not pushing back is a very good description of what's happening at Harvard. For people who are paying close attention, that's exactly the dynamic. I think for those who are seeing just the top headlines in our national newspapers, the story is Harvard takes a firm stand and is pushing back as aggressively as possible against the Trump administration. And I want to make sure to commend the leaders of my university for having done something courageous and important, which is to file a lawsuit and to refuse to let the federal government completely take over our institution. They've done something very different than what happened at other universities, including Columbia. They have taken a stand. Part of the reason that our faculty chapter of the American Association of University Professors filed a lawsuit before Harvard did was to make clear that it is in the interest of the faculty and of our students to defend higher education from these attacks in hopes that our leaders would follow suit. But your question really gets at the challenging dynamic, which is that at multiple points over the past year and a half, Harvard University has taken steps to curtail speech on its campus. It has passed new rules that make it much harder for students to demonstrate or protest. It's passed new rules that expose students to discipline if they hang a flag in their window or put a sign inside the window of their dorm. It has disciplined students for that, or at least called students in for sort of challenges along those types of things. Then, as you say, recently, our university has closed its Office of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging, and has retasked the people who worked there to work on different institutional priorities, which is precisely one of the demands that the Trump administration made when it threatened to cut off our funding. Our university just recently changed decades of practice whereby our faculty were the ones who had the ultimate decision over how to discipline our students for behavior on campus, and centralized that disciplinary process for a large number of our students into a new process that's controlled by the president of our university, which again was exactly one of the demands from the Trump administration. So we're seeing pushback and concession, which is worrisome because what is needed from our university is to stand tall for academic freedom for everyone, to stand tall for academic freedom regardless of who is protesting or what they're protesting about, but to recognize that academic freedom for all means for all of us.
Has the university got the backs of the many, many international students? Because there are many students at Harvard, like there are at other universities, who've come here, who were involved in those protests last year. And we've seen, some very high profile cases here where students have been taken into custody, in some cases in the street, and flown to detention centers, and now they're at risk of being deported. Does the university support these students, and how far, if it does, can it go to stop this happening, or are its hands tied?
This is one of the scariest things that's happening in our country right now. I teach criminal law. We are seeing people in our country grabbed off of the streets and held in federal prisons, essentially, federal detention centers, hundreds of miles from where they live. They're being grabbed off the streets, taken in the middle of the night, moved from one state to another so that courts don't know where they are, and then flown off hundreds of miles away to Louisiana, where they've been held, some of them for weeks, in detention centers without any criminal charges. Sometimes the only allegation against them being that they published an op-ed in their college newspaper. Rumeza Ozturk, a student at Tufts University, was snatched from the street in my hometown. I live there. This is happening in our neighborhoods, and it's done to intimidate.
So why do you think Harvard is pushing back so much compared to other universities which have either capitulated or stayed quiet? And why do you think that are they like biding their time? Are they waiting to see what happens with Harvard? Are you guys just the test case?
My hope is that it's a confluence of things. One is that there is leadership within our campus that is broad and diverse. Our leadership is both the people who are formally leading the university, but also our faculty and our students. Our university is a community, and there is leadership all across that community. And I have been so proud to see our faculty and our students standing up for these core principles of academic freedom, and meaning academic freedom for everyone. That we need to have a robust and open campus where we can share these ideas and where protest is celebrated as something that's essential to a healthy democracy. Harvard is the richest and most well-known university in the world. If there is any institution that has a moral obligation to stand up when the core pillars of our democracy are being threatened, it has to be that institution. How could we ever turn to anyone else and say that they should stand up if we didn't, when we have the resources and the recognition and the eyes of the whole world on us? But we can't do this alone. This can't be Harvard versus the United States. It can't be any one institution against the United States, because the United States is the most powerful country out there. Any institution will crack or come to its knees if it is doing this by itself. We need sector-wide and cross-sector solidarity, and we're starting to see it. Just in the wake of Harvard's lawsuit and our lawsuit, there have been now hundreds of university presidents who have signed joint statements saying what is being done to universities in this country is unacceptable. With law firms, there were a number of law firms that capitulated to the president's demands, but some that stood firm. And as soon as those that stood firm went to court, they immediately got protection from court orders saying that the president's executive orders against targeting these law firms was unlawful. That has started to inspire others to try to take similar stands. If everyone is doing this together, the hope is that individual examples of courage will breed more courage, and that groups standing in solidarity will make clear that what is happening right now is a fundamental threat to our society, to our existence as a constitutional democracy, and it is the people themselves who are the ones who are most empowered to prevent that from happening.
Do you think there's a slight complacency? You know, we've seen many other countries go down this route that we talked about. Is there a feeling among many people in the United States that it will never really happen here? You know, we're not going to go down that authoritarian route. Donald Trump is never going to become that kind of president. It's all talk. We can withstand this. And then slowly things start being chipped away at. I mean, is there a danger?
I mean, what you just described for me describes what it felt like during the election season. Right. I think that a lot of people have a sense of the inevitability of the United States, you know?
That it will always survive.
That it will always be the, city on a hill, the beacon of democracy for the world. You have folks who are international viewers, thinking about this from all over the world. In the United States, we forget sometimes that we're a young country. And we think that our existence has to just last for millennia, that this is how it has to be. The idea that we could slip into authoritarianism had been, I think, during the campaign season, really beyond the zone of imagination for a large number of people. I don't know that that's true anymore. I mean, the attacks on our military, on our courts, on our legal institutions, on our press, on our university, it seems it has been the core agenda for the entire opening act of the administration. So it's hard to really look at what has happened and see this as anything really, I think, other than a policy agenda of, in fact, trying to pursue these power grabs.
And even during the campaign, Donald Trump, on many occasions, mentioned the protests of summer 2024 at those college campuses. Do you think that, why is it you think that has proved to be such a big factor here? Because universities have long been the sites of protests. You think back to civil rights, you think back to Vietnam. What is it about Israel and Gaza that has really been the issue here?
I think part of it is an issue that has, in fact, so fractured our communities, right? It has fractured in ways that map differently ideologically than, is the normal sort of arrangement in our country, right? There are people who, would have voted against this president when he ran the first time and the second time, but who now feel that within their shared political universe, a deep fracture, because the conflict in Israel and Gaza has been quite divisive on college campuses. And I think that there is also some real exploitation of that coming now from the administration, that there is an effort to weaponize a lot of that pain and a lot of that internal division, and then pour gasoline on that in a way that is really intended to try to undermine the institutions themselves. Not try to help the institutions navigate through that tension or heal, but rather use it as an opportunity to try to dramatically undermine them, precisely again because universities are a bulwark against the types of authoritarian power grabs that we're seeing.
But is it also anti-Semitism? Because that is the claim from the administration. Is there anti-Semitism at play here?
I think there's anti-Semitism in the United States. I think that anti-Semitism is something that is vile and that should be opposed wherever we see it. Is there anti-Semitism on college campuses? Yes, there's anti-Semitism in the United States. But is the problem at the level and extent that we are seeing being claimed by the administration? I don't think this is an administration that is acting in good faith when it makes these claims as the basis for what it is doing. How do we know that? All we have to do is look at what the administration itself says and does. Years before October 7th, our current vice president gave a speech in which he said that universities are the enemy in America. And what he meant was they're an enemy to the right.
Vice president who went to Yale, by the way.
Vice president who went to Yale, gave a speech saying that universities were the enemy for his ideological cause. He says that in order to have the changes that he wants from a policy perspective and from an ideological perspective, he would need to destroy American universities. The leader of the task force that is investigating these universities and imposing these types of threats of funding cuts has similarly said that the problem they have is that these are woke universities, these are left universities. They don't like the ideology that they imagine is happening on these universities, and they want a different ideology. They want to impose their own requirements of what is taught and studied and said. The demand letter issued to our university is the biggest tell. If you read that letter sent to us on April 11th and has bullet after bullet after bullet of all the demands that the Trump administration made of Harvard in order for Harvard to avoid having this massive cuts to its funds, you will see that so many of those bullets have nothing to do with anti-Semitism. They want to appoint an external auditor to go through all of our syllabi, all of our courses, for a goal of achieving what the administration calls ideological rebalancing or ideological balance. What that means is they want us to be teaching differently than we are teaching. They want to control the syllabi, they want to control the research agendas, they want to control the questions asked and the answers given. That's not about anti-Semitism. That is about authoritarianism. It's a major threat to free thought in our society, and anti-Semitism, as real of an issue as it is in this country, is being weaponized in order to try to destroy American universities from an administration that I don't think has that as its true interest.
Andrew Manuel Crespo, thank you very much for your time and joining us here on Center Stage today.
Thank you so much for having me.